Hey everybody, Justin Morgan here with Wood & Morgan. I'm speaking with CJ Williams today about his work in the Bay Area and Northern California on dental practice acquisitions. CJ, can you give us an introduction?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Justin. My name's CJ Williams. I currently reside in the Bay Area. And worked for Bank of America, the Practice Solutions Department, for about 11 or 12 years. More recently in the Bay Area for the last 5, specializing in dental practice purchases. But I've also lived up in Seattle in the Northwest and focused on dental practice startups and projects. So a little bit of background on both, sides of that card, and depending on what you want to do and where you want to be, I've kind of been a part of that all. So, yeah, no, thanks for having me.
That's great, man. And if you were to recap, your 2023 year in terms of your deals and who you're working with and what trends you saw, can you give us some insight there?
Yeah, totally. I mean, 2023 was a solid year for Northern California. I think it presented a lot of unique opportunities, a little bit, a credit to the younger practitioners and the younger folks coming out of school. It was a stronger buyer pool, than we've seen in the past. The young doctors, I think, took a lot of critiques and a lot of advice since, post COVID and graduating school and coming out of that and setting themselves up for ownership. So a lot more younger doctors are becoming a little bit more prepared to buy the practice, which is also good in turn for the seller, to get somebody who's qualified, and somebody who is able to do the type of dentistry that they need to do to continue the legacy of their practice too. But we definitely saw some interesting play in the market in terms of inventory was a little low in terms of buying a practice as we got closer to the end of the year. So a lot of doctors actually pivoted and they moved to what we would call a shell purchase or an acquisition, where maybe there's a successful practitioner in one spot, they move down the street, build a bigger spot for themselves, and that enabled somebody coming in to kind of do a pseudo startup, whether that be low revenue practices that had an opportunity to jumpstart and take over, or even just that shell opportunity. It's kind of like a cheaper way to do a startup because, in California in general, and especially Northern California, the market to build a practice is, costs quite a bit of money. So there's some alternatives. You don't always have to just buy, and you don't always have to just start from scratch from a bare space. Like there are other opportunities that, you can get yourself into to be successful.
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of the jump starts in buying lower revenue practices because you don't have to spend all the time to find a location, start it, build it out, and permit. And it's usually cheaper, right? So it's usually cheaper than the build, and you get some patient base there. Now, when you mentioned the readiness of your clients, was that from like a liquidity, like a cash saving standpoint, or just like preparedness for the actual acquisition?
Yeah, no, totally. It's a little bit of both. A lot more in how you've managed your student loans, how you've saved the cash. You go through a lot when it comes to, undergrad, dental school, sometimes going into residency. After 8 to 12 years or 8 to 9 or 10 years, you feel like you want to buy the nice house and buy the nice car because that's what you're kind of deserved. But it's kind of good to start with some low means, and to make sure you're working yourself to that spot to where you're going to not have all these expenses, save some time for cash. From Bank of America's perspective, we've always wanted you to have around 10% of cash to what you're borrowing. In this post 2020, now every lender wants you to have around 10% of what you're borrowing. And that's what helped 99% of our clients, get through, the different things and challenges they faced in 2020. So, but I think the associates have done a great job of not living outside their means, stacking some cash away, making sure they're tracking their production. So if they find a nice practice to buy, that they can do what the lender and what their advisors would hope they could do to maintain a level and keep growing, whatever kind of practice. So it's a little bit of a mix of both, just being financially responsible and, being ready for, the challenges that any type of transition brings.
Yeah. What were some of the challenges in 2023?
Yeah, 2023 is, well, obviously we're talking about the elephant in the room, which is rates increasing. Um, it was a steady, I mean, if you look back at it, 2 to 3% over the last 3 years, like it was a steady, hefty increase that, a lot of folks hadn't seen in a long time. It was, I mean, shoot, there was one point in my career where we were talking about there was a one in front of that percentage, which today is long gone, right? And so that was the biggest thing. But what I'd have to say to anyone who's saying I'm waiting for rates to go down to make a move, if you look back at the 10-year Treasury, which is what most lending institutions in the dental world drive their rates off of, if you look back towards like where some of the associates were born in like the late 80s, early 90s, the interest rates were well and above, 8 or 9%, right? So are interest rates really up or are interest rates flat and they're coming back to normal, right?
Yeah.
2, 3% is abnormal, historic lows. And who knows if we'll ever get there again. But, I think at the end of the day, it's if you're waiting for them to come down, I think you've already missed the boat because I think really they're where they should be. So I think that's definitely a headwind, though. That's definitely got people, in a little bit of questioning mode. And I think in the state of California, Delta Premier becomes a big conversation.
Yeah.
The impact that has on not being able to be a premier provider and continue that fee schedule. So I think that brought a lot more due diligence. So I think it brought a lot more timing of the transactions, being elongated. Then as Justin would agree, time kills deals. So the longer we're negotiating and talking and waiting, and the more uncomfortable somebody's going to get, and the likelihood that somebody's going to walk away. So I think we dealt with a lot of that, and then I already touched on a little bit of the headwind of like the opportunities seem a little bit lacking and less desirable. But I think I'm hoping into next year we're going to see those post-COVID practices find their way out of it, make sure everybody's getting back into making some money, so that way it presents good opportunities to sell their practice and retire. Sure.
What about tailwinds? What went right?
Yeah, I think lending's more comfortable than they were the last 3 or 4 years. Beginning to open up that box. I think all lenders, not just Bank of America, but we're trying to make sure that the appetite grows, and because ultimately the default rate is still less than 0.5% on $8 billion. So the opportunity to be successful is 1,000% there. There is not any question that this industry isn't going to be successful, from here on out, right? But and then I think obviously the education in the marketplace, and we all sat at home. We got to watch a bunch of Zoom meetings about how to take care of ourselves financially, and then now we're getting back into the marketplace, going to trade shows and going to CEs that allow you to educate yourself. So I think the education piece for buyers and sellers, for that matter, has the opportunity is there to learn more, and I think the market's going to take hold of that.
Cool. What about DSO impact? Are you seeing DSOs a lot?
Yeah, I think maybe not as much as we were, but they're definitely being more selective. 5 or 6 years ago, they felt like they were gobbling up everything that existed. But now, a lot of people have grown these mini DSO empires and thought, I'm going to sell all 20 of these practices and it's going to be great. Well, the DSO now has come in and said, we'll take that one and that one. We don't want that one. We're not taking that one. And they're just being more selective on what they're buying. I think where they're really making an impact that we're seeing specifically is on the female dentist coming out of school. Coming out of school, the female dentist is someone they're approaching often to talk about, hey, look, you can come over here and be a mother, and we'll pay you good pay. We'll give you motherly hours. You can be a mom as well, right? And actually, in a scenario that I know of someone who got relocated 3 times, she got paid down about $50,000 to $100,000 of her student debt. over those 3 relocations, but now she's in a contract for like 10 years. So she's not able to really, there's no flexibility there, So they definitely know who they want and who they're going after. But there's still, I think, the last stat I saw, 75% of the market is still private practice owned, at least in the state of California. So it's very much so, still a private practice market with a little bit of DSO component. It's a real thing, but ultimately, I think you would agree, it's not really their competition, a private practice owner's competition in a way.
Yeah, it's usually the other private practice dentists that are looking. What about your favorite win from 2020?
Yeah, we actually had a client who was who had done some seller note financing for practice and a building, and actually like 3 or 4 years prior to that, she had done that prior to last year. She came to me and said, "Well, the seller has passed, and now the trust is trying to take over the building. Then they want to up my seller note 3, 4, 5%." Because they're not in dental, they want to hedge their bet. They want to do all these things. We've got, 75 days to make this happen. And so we were able to roll in, give a good interest rate, help her buy the building and the practice, out from underneath of that. But that where that goes, and save her quite a bit of money, not only from the seller that she initially took out, but just in general. And from where she was going to be of the seller note. So it's one of those things that financing is readily available, and 100% financing is readily available. So when somebody's mentioning seller note, you should be asking yourself why, and you should be making sure that you're asking questions of what your other options are. I think then in that moment, a few years back, that was the only option, I think. But there's definitely people out there who are looking to take advantage of you as a dentist. Because they underestimate your ability to, run a business. And so she connected with the right people and got us over to us, and it's much, much happier than she would have.
Good. And then what are your expectations for 2024?
Yeah, I think the market's going to rebound pretty well. And you can already see an uptick in practices coming available. You're seeing some of the folks who are dead set on a practice be more open to that jumpstart scenario or that shell opportunity scenario. Listen, ultimately, wherever you want to be, if that's where you want to be, you got to figure out a way to make something work. Because just because you're in a town doesn't always mean that the practice is just going to pop up for sale in that town, right? So, being flexible and not thinking, because our portfolio would tell us that not in startup, jumpstart, acquisition, neither one's really better than the other. It's more or less just the situation you got yourself into. Right. And how you plan and manage that. So, and then you hope, as everybody does, you hope to see rates flatten a tad. Like I said earlier, I don't think they're going to fall. The bottom's going to fall out like maybe everybody thinks it might. But, you would hope to see a little bit of tame in the market, give you a little bit more comfort. But at the same time, we've already talked about how, you're kind of missing the boat because they're 12 years ago when I started this, the rates were exactly what they are today. So we've kind of come full circle.
Cool, man. Thanks for your time today. And thanks for the info.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. I appreciate it.
Yeah.